This is Emmett, and I am going to do the AuthorTube Newbie Tag because that's what I am. How did I find out about AuthorTube? Lily Mead. That's an easy one. What genres do you write in? Pretty much contemporary. What is your preferred writing tense, point of view, and category of story? I am a giant cliche. I write YA, and I default to first person present tense. If I try that and it doesn't fit, I'll switch it up, but pretty much that. Are you a plotter, pantser, or plantser? Plantser. I tend to have a blurry watercolor idea of where things are headed and often a few specific scenes or even lines that I know I'm moving towards, but I don't write out much of anything in advance because I find it takes the wind out of my sails. It's better for me to be racing towards those parts I want to get to in a messy draft before I forget or stop caring, rather than write an outline or notes, which just makes me think, I know what's going to happen, so why bother? I'm very petulant. Are you a self-published, published, or yet to be published? I am not yet traditionally published. I am sort of mildly self-published, but not so it counts in the sense of sales records. I make zines. I can show you one. So they're basically just an outlet to put out short things out in a like fun tactile format. For example, when I did this one for the first run that I did 60 copies, and I said all of the covers are going to be completely different. So for example, these are from that same first run. I ended up doing another run later with more similar copies, but they were still like, they were all hand done. They all had glitter on them. Like, it's like doing things in a way that's all about sort of the actual physical act of like making the book. Like, these are all sewn together by me. Obviously it's also about like there's writing inside and the pictures and stuff are all like photocopied, but yeah, it's less about the same things that self-publishing is about, I think, for me, at least for most people, if that makes sense. Anyway, so I have total creative control, like right down to the like tiny stitching, minus the pressure of having an Amazon ranking and stuff like that could come back to bite me if I continue to pursue traditional publishing, which I am doing. That is part of my long-range plan. So I'm yet to be published. I'm doing weird stuff that a limited number of other humans who I mostly know personally are reading in the meantime. And if you want to be one of those people, you can check out my Patreon, link in the down below. 6. What publishing company, literary agent, and/or printing company are you represented by or use? If you're not yet published, what is your dream publishing house and/or literary agent? I had an agent, but now I do not. I was signed with Lindsay Reber at SJGA, who I only learned the existence of probably the same day I queried her, but she was the first person to request a full from me less than a month into querying, and honestly, it was a perfect match. I do not have a bad thing to say about her. This would absolutely be a ringing endorsement for everybody to go query her right now, but she is no longer agenting, which is why I am no longer agented. And at the time that she left the biz, my first book had been out on sub for quite a while, but I hadn't completed a second book, and I'm still working on that, which is why I've yet to jump back into querying. I don't like to do the dream agent thing so much, partly because of my experience querying Lindsay as kind of a shot in the dark. I knew that she was interested in books with LGBT characters, which certainly fit mine, and you know, there were certain thematic things that she said, but I didn't know anything about her. I was just sort of going on what she was looking for. And she turned out to be such a great fit for me in terms of communication style and editorial guidance. And that's the thing I think a lot of baby authors don't understand about having an agent when they're still in the fantasy stage of like looking for somebody, is that it really comes down to how well you fit together, not just how the other person is like great objectively and like a superstar rock star. I look at prospective agents I might query very differently now that I've had an agent, and specifically having had an agent who still managed to make time for me when my book, for whatever reason, was not turning into money for either of us. Like, my dream agent now is somebody who will do their best to sell my book and also not hold it against me if that just doesn't happen. And that might sound really depressing, but rejection is a big part of being a writer, and mediating that rejection is a big part of an agent's job, and you want somebody who's still going to treat you kindly and be rooting for your work when the chips are down, which is really hard to predict, but liking each other as people to begin with is certainly a start. And I, you know, not having worked with an editor, at least on a novel-length project, or on fiction at all, I've had editors in sort of a journalism context, but yeah, so I'm hesitant to say I have a dream editor. I mean, I do, because my favorite author who's living is also an editor. But yeah, but I also think like it comes so much down to the relationship that you're gonna build with that person. And I think that you gotta see how it works out. 7. What AuthorTube related videos can we expect to find on your channel? I don't know. Maybe I'll do this one and then I'll give up because talking on camera is awkward. Only time will tell. When did you start writing? Always. As somebody who works with kids, that is something I do, by the way, it's come to my attention that this is not really that remarkable. Most kids are telling stories if they're not writing them, and a lot of them are writing stories or drawing stories and always making stories. What I find interesting is that it's a relatively limited number of people who just keep doing that seriously, because I think a lot of kids do it seriously, and that's not that remarkable, but I kept doing it seriously, and in fact have become more and more serious about it, and I don't really know why that is. Yeah. I think that's the big mystery, and that's something I am super curious about other people who are writers' experiences with, and also people who were kids who were very serious about storytelling and writing and who are now not, about how that happens. How do you not turn into a writer? 9. What was the first story you ever wrote? Okay, so when I was a kid, I would tell my mom little stories and she would write them down, and every once in a while one of these things pops up to the surface from some box or file somewhere, but they don't tend to be dated. Anyway, a lot of them are about various animals named Waldo, and I recently found out, like within the past year or so, I found out that Waldo is actually like a hand-me-down imaginary friend in my family. One or possibly several of my older cousins also have Waldo stories from their childhoods, and Waldo seems to have the power to shapeshift and also be more than one animal at the same time. At least my Waldo was. My Waldo was usually a polar bear, or a series of Arctic animals, a contingent of Arctic animals. I was deeply obsessed with the North Pole, which is reasonable because the North Pole is dope. What authors have inspired your writing the most? Okay, so Louise Fitzhugh's novel, Harriet the Spy, opens with Harriet scratching a stick in the dirt and explaining to her friend Sport how to play a game she calls Town, which is essentially the game of fiction. You invent a place and the people who inhabit it and their relationships and what happens to them and what they do about it. I could gush about Louise Fitzhugh all day and about all the other authors who've inspired me before or since for a lifetime, but I'm going to keep it simple and say that I still replay that scene in my head of Harriet scratching the stick in the dirt when I'm starting a new project or trying to untangle one I've gotten lost in. There are a limited number of things that people are ready to tell you at 9 years old that will be professionally useful to you your entire life, but Louise gave me that much. Do you schedule your writing sessions or simply get to writing when you can find the time? I am an incredibly sloppy person by nature, so anything I schedule, I will rebel against myself about for unknown reasons, so I get a lot more done if I just, do it. 12. Do you type on a computer, typewriter, write everything out by hand, or use a blend of those? And where do you write in general? My process tends to change a lot from draft to draft, but for the book I'm writing now, I've basically written it all of it out in notebooks first, and then when I've got an arbitrary chunk of notebook filled, I'll transcribe it onto the computer. I change things as I go, so it's a bit like writing my first and second draft at the same time, although the major structural changes are going to come later. I've also done typewriter drafts in the past, but as of now, I have 0 typewriters in my life. They've all been loaned or given away to friends or gone back to the Salvation Armies from whence they came. So I am between typewriters. I don't know if I will become a typewriter person again. I definitely find I like crave it sometimes, and there's a certain like, it's hard to explain. I tried to break it down into like adjectives for like the different kinds of drafts you get. Like I always felt like that basically like writing in a notebook is like it's pliable. It's got this like it's like Play-Doh almost. You sort of and then writing on the screen is like a liquid, and writing in a typewriter, it's kind of like crunchy and chunky. It's like building little Lego blocks, and I find like for different kinds of drafts, like I've definitely tried to write first drafts on a typewriter, and I didn't get that far in those projects. But I find for in between drafts where you like have a draft that you have maybe written in a notebook and then put it on the computer, and then you start rewriting it on a typewriter, I find that really helps to clarify and like kind of condense it a little bit and like just sort of like build it in a better way. It's been a while since I did the typewriter thing, so I don't know if I'm explaining that the best. But anyway, yeah, then my first novel that I completed had a couple different typewriter drafts over the like 5 years that I was rewriting it. I definitely do not discount the usefulness of the typewriter. I haven't wanted to do that for a while. And there are definitely downsides, there are definitely downsides just in terms of like noise. They're loud. Most typewriters are quite loud, and that's in part like what's really satisfying about it. When you're a person who's like living with a lot of other people, or it can limit like when you're able to write, for example. Like just in terms of being a good neighbor, it's a consideration for me at least. 13. What are you most looking forward to now that you're a part of AuthorTube? Maybe I'll stop feeling self-conscious about talking to a camera alone in my apartment. Who knows? Yeah, mostly, like, I have really enjoyed watching other people's videos and sort of getting a little insight into, because it's, like, a pretty weird, like, alone thing to do, but I also think, like, as writers, we are really obsessed with people. For the most part, and whether we're introverts or extroverts, we are like obsessed with human beings, and so yeah, it's just nice to like connect with human beings when you're writing about human beings, and it's nice to connect with human beings about the act of writing about human beings that you made up. Anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.